Hello and welcome to the Action Network podcast presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. I'm your host, Anthony Dabbundo, and this is a special The Championships Wimbledon Best Bets edition. I'm joined by Action Network tennis editor Avery Zimmerman and Monday Match Analysis's finest and Tennis Channel's own Gill to join us for yet another Grand Slam preview, the third time we've done this. And definitely the hardest, I think, of the three so far, just because of the limited sample that we have of grass court tennis. We've been playing grass for 3 weeks now. Roland Garros feels like it ended a week ago. We went to grass. Some people cared, some people didn't. They played a couple of small tournaments, and now everybody goes to Wimbledon, and it's really hard to kind of gauge the form, but we're here to cash some more long shots. It's a wide open field outside of the top. Novak Djokovic minus 175 at FanDuel to win the trophy yet again, to tie Rogers' record, to etch himself further into the history books, and potentially get 3/4 of the way to the calendar Grand Slam, which he nearly did in 2021. So we get to the draw here, and yes, Djokovic is the overwhelming favorite. There's only one player in the field that has ever beaten him at Wimbledon, Andy Murray, many, many, many moons ago. And thus, he has not lost a grass match in 5 years. So before we get into our best bets off the top, Djokovic, what's the path that he doesn't win Wimbledon?
He gets hurt. I honestly think we're in that position where if you ask me what's Novak's biggest threat or what/who is, I'm going to go with the what. And that's been the one vulnerability for Novak this year in 2023 is despite winning the Australian Open, winning Roland Garros, he has been battling his body pretty much the whole time. He had obviously the hamstring in Australia. And then in the lead up to Roland Garros, his elbow wasn't right. And, the latter really became a non-factor come Paris. But, he's definitely, that's the one area where he's shown his age is he has been nicked up.
He's minus 175 for a reason. Not only is he by far the best grass quarter on earth right now, he also couldn't have picked up a better draw, which he certainly didn't need, but he will take. Pedro Cachin first round, Nakashima or Thompson in the second, maybe Stan in the third round or Rusevori. It's maybe Hurkacz in the fourth round would be a little bit tough. Bublik in the quarters, possibly. If Nick was healthy, maybe Nick in the quarters, but beyond that, it's nothing. He doesn't have any landmines. Alcaraz is a much tougher path. I think he couldn't have drawn it up any better. So yeah, Gil's right. It's just about injury or bust. And you never know in this sport. Maybe Dennis Istomin's in the field this year, but I don't think he is. So I think Novak's looking good.
Yeah, grass kind of is the one surface where you can get those kind of results, those fluky, like we played a bunch of tie breaks. I had a great serving day, and it kind of became a coin flippy kind of match. But Djokovic being so good on the return kind of makes it hard to do that kind of thing to him. But upsets can happen. We're going to start with best bets. Avery and I agree. I will let Avery make the case first for his best bet. What is your best bet for, we're doing quarter prices here, quarter price at Roland Garros, or excuse me, quarter price at the Championships on Monday?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Roberto Bautista Agut in the third quarter. I know we are aligned on this, but I will run it down. Bautista Agut is a semifinalist. 2019, he fought Novak and actually played him pretty well in that match, but Djokovic was just too good. He's 19-7 all time at Wimbledon. He's a veteran, and in this era, I don't think that younger players really care that much about grass. Generally speaking, it's a short season and they don't really prioritize it, whereas someone like Bautista Agut has always been very comfortable on grass. It's as unique a surface as they have on tour, even though all of the surfaces are becoming more and more similar. He also played well in Halle. He reached the semifinals, beat Medvedev, beat Nakashima, who's a pretty solid grass quarter, beat Vavasori, pretty solid player, and he played Rublev pretty tough. I'm sure he ran out of a little bit of energy at that point, but if he's rounding into fitness, and I don't think that'll be too much for him to get through 4 or 5 matches. His path is pretty straightforward as well, with Roman Safulin, the winner of Gasquet or Mute, maybe Borna Coric, Ben Bonzi in the third round. And then it's Shapovalov, who's completely out of form, could typically be dangerous on grass, but right now isn't anything dangerous, or Casper Ruud, who is playing golf and is not preparing and is perhaps getting ready for the summer hard court swing. After that, it's just Sinner or Fritz. And he wouldn't be more than, plus 150, plus 200 in a match like that. So at 14-1, I think you're getting a really good price.
Yeah, I agree. And I took some Robbie bats just before this. I think the question with him is the form, right? It hasn't really been there. But remember, this was a tournament last year where he was pegged as a real dark horse until he was unable to play. So, is there like a pent up kind of like, I got screwed last year. I really want to focus on Wimbledon. He probably sees the same thing we see, which is that this field outside of the number one guy is incredibly weak. Maybe the weakest Wimbledon field I've ever seen outside the top guy, just generally as the tour is shifting. And you said it, Avery, like these young guys, the season being so compressed, they just don't seem to care that much about grass. They didn't grow up on it. The game being more and more baseline heavy has kind of shifted away from grass, and some of the top guys don't move well on it, or they don't feel comfortable at net. And that kind of creates an opening for, a wily veteran who, even though, the tradition of the Spanish guys is to be grinders and, play defensively deep in the court, Robbie's more comfortable kind of playing in a more aggressive style. And, could that work for him in this quarter, which is very, very vulnerable at the top? I think 2 of the 4 quarters, you look and you're like, man, these top seeds have no history of any success on grass. Outside of their, power rating as tennis players, what makes them so favored and why couldn't they get upset? I think Robbie's the kind of guy that could take advantage. So yeah, I'm going to take Roberto Bautista Agut 14-1 to win his quarter. It's my best bet as well. We're in agreement. So he will lose in the first round, probably.
Gill, well, look, I'll say I have him in the quarterfinal. I have him making it there. And so by that, I agree with you guys. And I like that price. I like that bet. The concern is just physical wear with Bautista Agut, being a 35-year-old who doesn't get cheap points with his serve, hasn't really proven that he has the legs in best of 5 since 2019 when he made 2 quarterfinals. So my biggest issue with RBA has nothing to do with does he have the tennis. It's really more, does he have the legs? And also, I'm very confident that he's going to go deep. I just think come that quarterfinal, maybe you get a letdown. Whereas my best bet is Sebastian Korda as far as quarter prices are concerned. That's out there at plus 450. It's an interesting season for Korda because I'd say the sample size of when Sebastian Korda has been healthy is actually a very small sample size. It's about 3 tournaments. Adelaide, he makes the final, almost beats Djokovic. Australian Open, he beats Hurkacz. He beats Medvedev in straights. That win aged so well because Daniil kind of got it together after that. And then Queens, where he made the semifinal and picked up some great wins. Just kind of looked a little bit helpless against Carlos Alcaraz, but that's Alcaraz. He had the injury, though, and that's why he withdrew from the Australian Open, missed all of clay season, has been off the radar. You just can't ignore how good he's been when he's been healthy. And then you combine a guy who has this unbelievably smooth offensive baseline game, flat 2-handed backhand, helps so much on grass. The problem for him was his serve was powder puff for his height. He's 6'5" guy, just wasn't serving well, and he's remedied that. So now he's serving big. It makes me like him even more on the grass. I mean, I'll say like the market's onto it. He's the price for him is reflective of everything I'm saying right now, but I still think you got to take it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Korda kind of became the dark horse guy when he had the run at Queens. And then we was like, okay, I was sitting there. I was thinking, I really want to bet this. Just let me bet it now. Just blind bet. Give me a quarter price. I just want to bet it because I know if the quarter draw comes out and it's good, he's going to be like 4 or 5-1. And here we are. He's, the best I saw is 5-1 out there. So like Korda, like I want to bet him too. And we're going to talk about quarter two because it's really fascinating. Kind of the top 2 guys, Medvedev and Tsitsipas are vulnerable, of course, but picking the winner out of that quarter, I think is going to be a really fun challenge and kind of there's going to be some long shots to be had. But yes, Sebi Korda, certainly fun, has the game. We're going to move on to quarter 1, which given the form and kind of who likes grass and who doesn't like grass, quarter 1 is really interesting because Carlos Alcaraz is the odds-on favorite, minus 140 out there to take the quarter. He's a pretty heavy favorite, Alcaraz, as they call him now. But the draw is kind of brutal. Like everybody in the, the top 5 to 6 guys on the odds board are people that are very comfortable on the clay that can really push him in different ways, whether it's a Grigor Dimitrov or a De Minaur, pretty much guaranteed a 4th round matchup with one of ADM, De Minaur, or Sasha Zverev. Matteo Berrettini's in the draw. He's got no form, but what's your, read on quarter one? We'll start with Avery here. Do you have a best bet for quarter one? And kind of, how do you handicap this with Rune, Tiafoe, Dimitrov, Berrettini, De Minaur, Zverev, and Alcaraz all in the same quarter, just being so unbalanced?
Yeah, this is a really interesting quarter. I'm going to go with Alex De Minaur at 11-1. He actually does have a very tough draw, but I think his comfortability and his fitness level makes this price worth it. He has a somewhat of a free first round. There's no free first rounds in the sport, but Kimmer Kopian is as close as you're going to get at Wimbledon. And then he has Sonego or Berrettini. As you said, Berrettini comes in with no form. He played a pretty lifeless match in Stuttgart against Sonego. It would be tough to see him doing much damage, especially because his health is still completely up in the air. We didn't even know if he was going to end up playing. Beyond that, he then would go through likely Zverev, Alcaraz, and Rune, and that's very tough. But I actually think that there's a very decent chance that one of those 3, or one of those 2, I should say, between Zverev and Alcaraz could be upset by that point. And I also think that De Minaur has the head-to-head win just a week ago against Rune and Queen, so I wouldn't be too concerned about that matchup either. And generally speaking, even though Alcaraz played one of the best matches he's ever played, if not the best on grass, against De Minaur at Queens, I actually thought that he showed some great signs. He competed with Alcaraz in Barcelona, which is just about as good of a service, or close to as good of a service as you can get for Carlos. So I think that's the price that I would go with. I think Tiafoe at 9-1 isn't awful, but I think he's got all these landmines in Yibing Wu, Alexei Popyrin or Dominic Stricker, Dimitrov, Bodic or Rune, Carlos, Zverev, and then Demon. So really, it's kind of the same idea as what you're looking at with Demon being a tough path, but I think they're about on the same level. And at 11-1, I'll take De Minaur.
Yeah, I love Tiafoe. I love his game on this surface. I think it's, he's really shown, real improvement in the last 9 to 12 months. But the question is, like, how many tie breaks is he about to play in this tournament with all these guys that, can, keep holding serve with him? And he's run like a god. He's played excellently well in tiebreakers over the last year, but, he's, 1 or 2 coin flip tie breaks away from going out pretty early. And the price on him just wasn't quite what I was hoping for. Gill, what are your thoughts on, best bet in this quarter and thoughts as you break it down?
Yeah, I mean, everything you're saying about how just good this quarter is, I mean, you're not going to find someone who has a path that looks nice because this quarter is too good. I power rank the Wimbledon contenders, and 4 out of the top 10 are in this quarter, and it ended up being 6 out of the top 15 were in this quarter. So there's a lot of imbalance. Ultimately, I think first of all, I do think Alcaraz is going to navigate his way through. A bad draw for a player that good means if you have a bad day, you're going to lose. But what's been so impressive about Carlitos' season is that he is not having those bad matches. He had them last year, kind of, every once in a while. I don't want to say regularly, but every once in a while. And he's really avoided that. I mean, Marozsan was a bad loss on paper. I don't even think he played that bad, but that's the only surprising loss early in a tournament you can even point to. So I actually think Alcaraz who will get through, but so I go to the other side, and yeah, Tiafoe, I saw it at 10-1. So that's a little bit better than 9-1, obviously. And I'm looking at someone whose backhand is just so effective on this surface, flattens out the serve, gets free points with that. He's always moved well. If you look at the Wimbledon history, he's lost some heartbreakers, some 5-setters. Well, the biggest things that have gotten better for Tiafoe in the last year are his fitness and his focus. He has less dips in matches, and his endurance, which was a problem in the past, it's gotten really, really good. Not a problem on grass. So I trust him to get through those tight matches, get through those tie breaks. And at 10-1, he's my favorite bet to win the quarter.
Yeah, Alcaraz, came in kind of unproven on grass, but like, there's no reason his game with the power he has wouldn't quickly translate once he got some matches under his belt. and had some success, not success for the player in the first time really playing on grass last year at Wimbledon. Maybe not success compared to where he was power rated in the market, but nevertheless didn't play. I didn't think a poor match against in Wimbledon last year. So as we move on, I have nothing here. I'm kind of excited to watch this quarter play out. I'm not laying, the minus price on Carlos, but there's nobody that has really like a path that's jumping out to me or a number where I'm like, yes, I really want to bet this guy. So I'm going to skip quarter one personally. Going to move on to quarter two. Let's have some fun. The draw at the top, it's the two guys that, have not really shown a whole lot on this surface. And I think we all, Medvedev continues to stand, 20 feet off the baseline to return serves. And that has not gone well for him in the past on the surface. And he's slipping all over the court. And, it just really doesn't seem to get him. And Tsitsipas, losing to Nicholas Jarry and, seems to be very focused on his relationship at the moment. Can't return on grass, whether you think about that or not. His return game on grass is so poor that, it really makes him vulnerable. And you saw that, in past losses, including to Kyrgios last year. So in this quarter now with those two guys, now what? You said Korda, Gill's on Korda, Avery, initial thoughts, best bet, and kind of, is this not the quarter where we all need to take like a 20-1 or longer to win this, right?
Yeah, I'll give you a 40-1 in Marcin Fucsovics, who I love his game. If you're concerned about fitness with any of your tennis bets, which is always one of the biggest parts of the game, this is the guy to not be worried about. He's built like the Hulk, and he has the cardio to back it up as well. And he's got that grass acumen to back it up as well. We talk about Tiafoe being one of the most informed players. Fucsovics pushed him in a coin flip match. I believe it was in Stuttgart. I think he's easily a top 15 player on the surface at this point, because we talked about how young players kind of view the surface. And you look at the top players in this quarter, it's Medvedev, who's still really struggling on grass. And like you said, you can take away the time and space, much like Hurkacz did in 2021. And it's a pretty simple path towards, at least execution may be tougher, but the game plan is very clear with beating Med on grass. Seb Korda is still young and beatable. He's also still getting his fitness back. Andy Murray is old. Tsitsipas, you talked about, he's, I believe, 1-2 on grass coming in, or 1-3 coming in. And he's looked pretty poor. Like you said, he's focused on other things maybe at the moment, or looking ahead beyond into the hard court season. I thought Norrie looked very underwhelming, particularly against Korda. Go all the way down to Fucsovics at 40-1, and his path is pretty clear cut, actually. You have him at the same price as Dominic Thiem, Marcos Giron. He's got longer odds than Maxime Cressy, who's won, I think, one match out of maybe his last 12 or something like that. And this is a crazy price to me. This is a guy that's reached the quarterfinals. His path is Greek Spore, where it's just about a coin flip, Marcos Giron or Hugo Dellien. And then he's got either Med or Manarino, who is surely going to be gassed after this run in Mallorca. Side note, I'm very keen towards fading, and I'll talk more about this later, but these guys that are making these deep runs in Eastbourne and Mallorca right now. But even if it's Med, he has a win against him at Roland Garros, which is a Grand Slam. He has the confidence. This is an even better surface for him. And then it comes next round is Cerundolo and Tommy Paul, who are both playing on a Saturday ahead of a Grand Slam, or maybe even Milos Raonic. And then it's any one of Tsitsipas, Norrie, Seb Korda, or maybe Andy Murray. This is a somewhat straightforward path for Fucsovics. I don't think he's a long underdog in any of these matches. And at 40-1, I think this is just right up there with Bautista Agut and one of my favorite bets of the tournament.
I like Greek Sport a little bit too much. And I kind of like Greek Sport's price. It's such an interesting first round match. I kind of agree with you. Where I agree with you is that there shouldn't be that big a difference between Fucsovics and Greek Sport. They both have this opportunity at the draw that you've laid out. But I've really loved what I've seen from Greek Sport, who won Hertogenbosch earlier in the grass court season. He's a little bit underpowered in heavy conditions, but in the quick conditions, his serve and his forehand, they come through and they penetrate. And what I really love about his grass game, probably most of all, is just how much he's coming forward. And when I was envisioning, okay, let's see, Daniil Medvedev, first of all, Medvedev would have to get through Manarino second round. I know that's a guy who's gone deep here in the week before Wimbledon, but I think that's rough for Daniil. But let's say it comes down to Greek Sport. Medvedev, I really love the way Talon is just going to get to net often, early and often, and execute volleys. A little bit more so than Fucsovic. I think he'd stay back a bit more. So my vision was actually Greek Spore in the quarters. So I have Korda over Greek Spore in the quarters.
So you guys are head to head in first round. I think my focus and kind of interest is on a couple of these Americans. I just want to kind of rapid fire these questions at you guys. So Ben Shelton, am I crazy? 28-1. Tsitsipas is the seed, right? So he gets Taro Daniel in round 1, Maxime Cressy in round 2, or Gera, who's not very comfortable on the grass. You talked about Cressy, hasn't won any matches anywhere all year. Potentially Andy Murray or Peniston in round 3 if Tsitsipas falls. Like Shelton served, like how is he not, not necessarily a coin flip against Tsitsipas, but definitely like pretty competitive with him if that happens in round 3. Korda, Nori is the scammer, you're not going to get me to believe in him. So where's the guy where Ben Shelton has no chance? Or is it more a matter of, he doesn't have the legs to do it over 5 matches, but also he's not going to be playing these long drawn out points. Ben Shelton, am I crazy?
He's not returning serve well enough, is probably the biggest thing, where I think if he were to play Tsitsipas, I definitely want that money line because I think we'd be looking at tie breaks. I don't think either of them are really returning well enough to break. But yeah, Shelton's having a lot of trouble, I think, just adjusting to the pace of play initially. His backhand is very long. Normally we look to the one-handers who can struggle with the backhand return, but he's had some trouble on the two-hander with the return. So like if it were Murray in the third round, who's going to make returns and play, you would think I would not love Shelton there unless Andy were physically cooked.
Yeah, Shelton versus Murray would be actually a pretty fun match, but I would certainly think that Murray could be a very valuable option there if he's anything minus 150 or shorter. Also, against Chris Eubanks this past week, 14 double faults, and then he had 10 double faults in 2 matches in Queens. So if he's aggressive enough, and it's because, more of a Maxime Cressy style of I'm going to go all out on the second serve, and if it goes in, great, I'll win the point. But he's only was winning 60 to 70% of those points. So at the same time, it's not necessarily good enough to say it's a massive second serve. And I just don't think he has the comfortability yet. It's his first season, which is all right, but that's a really difficult draw for him.
You talked about Manarino being worried about the legs. Am I crazy on Manarino, or is Manarino the kind of guy where we're all going to bet him money line second match against Medvedev?
I think the short angles that he attacks Medvedev with is a huge problem for Daniil. You have to move inside the court and cut off some angles against Manarino, or he's going to stand in the doubles alley on his serve, and you're going to be running the rest of the way with how well he changes direction. And just the height of bounce stuff and the way he matches Medvedev for consistency. I think there's a real matchup problem there. And we've seen that with other players on tour and Manarino, and just Manarino on grass in general. It's a nightmare. I mean, he gave Rafa, and Nadal was playing really well. He gave him everything in that early. I don't know if it was a first round or a second round, but Wimbledon last year, he was really taking it to Nadal the first 2 sets, and then he got tired, which is really the way Manarino loses, is if you kind of put him into the trenches and extend the match long enough.
Yeah, he actually probably should have beaten Federer in 2021 as well. If he didn't slip and hurt his knee, he was up 2 sets to 1. He was in the driver's seat for that match for sure. Fortunately, you don't root for injuries, but thank you, Manarino, for not ruining Federer's last run at Wimbledon completely. But like you just noted, the legs are going to be a big problem. This is going to be his 4th straight week of tennis, and he's made a somewhat deep run, at least in every week. And if this was a best 2 out of 3, maybe I'd feel a little bit better about Manarino against Medvedev too. But 3 out of 5, Med's still going to be deep. But at this point, there's going to be so much tennis. This is going to be one of the longest Wimbledon matches that you'll see on a minute per set basis. And I think he would be a trendy pick, and I'd love to take him as well, but I just don't trust that he'll be able to get his legs under him by then.
Yeah, I'm not going to invest in 25 to 1 because I agree the volume of tennis is certainly going to catch up with Manarino at his age and his lack of ability to go that deep. But I will 100% if we get Medvedev Manarino. I mean, what are we getting on that number? 4 to 1, 5 to 1? It won't be that high.
I don't think you will get that.
Yeah. All right. Well, either way, we'll see what the number opens up. I'm gonna probably be on it just for the fun. And I think Manarino as soon as the draw came out, that was the first thing I circled. So that's certainly notable. The last name I had for quarter two, we talked about being out on scam. Well, the next seed kind of after him, Tommy Paul. Now this draw, Milos Raonic in round two, a qualifier in round one, potentially Denis Novak in round two, round three, Frankie Cerundolo. We'll talk about that match in a little bit. Round four, whoever survives that top quarter, whether it's Griekspoor, Fucsovic, Manarino, Medvedev, can Tommy Paul not go toe to toe with everybody in his section of the draw and get to the quarterfinals?
I've just been a little bit underwhelmed in general with Tommy recently, and maybe it's not fair because I never expect much from him on clay because the forehand becomes a problem on clay. It's less of a problem on grass. Like, he can use his backhand, he can come forward. But it's been a while since he's had a win that I've liked. And that's why, that's why I see him more as an opportunity for Korda to move forward than I see him having value. And just to kind of like put a number on it, I guess, okay, his last top 50 win, or he did get a top 50 win this week against Sebastian Baez on grass. That's not necessarily a banner win. His top 50 win before that, you have to go back to Miami, beating Davidovich Fokina.
Tommy Paul, I completely agree with Gill with that. I was way more bullish on Paul last year coming into Wimbledon. I thought he looked really, really solid. Actually, I think it was Eastbourne as well, where he's actually made the semifinals here as well. He lost to De Minaur last year in an awesome match. And he was actually, I thought, adjusting really well to the grass last year. This year, I haven't really been impressed at all with how he's been playing. He hasn't played a ton of tennis, so perhaps he'll be rounding into form at the right time, but he's another player where he's not completely suited to the grass. To his credit, he smoked Adrian Manarino, who's a beast on the grass last year in the second round of Wimbledon, winning in straight sets. So that's a really impressive win. He also smoked Thierry Vesely, who's another pretty solid grass quarter, who maybe was a little bit dead in the legs after playing a 5-setter with Davidovich Fokina. But nonetheless, yeah, I think there's a little bit of value on Tommy here. I won't personally bet it. I think perhaps it's the right number. But if he finds his tennis and plays a little bit like he was last year, I actually think that's a pretty solid number.
All right. We have to mention Andy, as like I said earlier, the only player in the draw that's won this tournament besides Novak. Plus 550, third best odds. No, thank you. But thoughts on Murray, and kind of, is Peniston live at 8 to 1 at FanDuel right now for the first round matchup against Murray? Because Peniston on the grass has put up some impressive results in the last couple of years. Murray, not the Murray of old, even though he's had a nice little resurgence here, and I'm sure that will be a night match on center court. What are your thoughts on Peniston at 8 to 1 as a potential long shot upset in the first round?
I think it's a good spot maybe to take Peniston to take a set. I'll have to check exactly what the number is, but I'm sure it's something like plus 150 to plus 200. I think that's a really good look because he is a very comfortable grass quarter who is a Brit, obviously, and they have a huge advantage given the resources and growing up on the surface. But I am actually pretty bullish on Andy here as well. I think it was unfortunate. I was a bit confused by his efforts to get the seed at Wimbledon. I'm sure there's nuances behind it, and he knows a lot better than I do about how he was approaching it. But he put himself in a big situation where I know his big goal was to get this seed at Wimbledon, and ultimately he needed to win a match or two at Queens, and he looked absolutely gassed by then after 2 weeks of challenger tennis. I actually think he's in a really good spot nonetheless, and he got a pretty nice draw. When you look at what he has in front of him, which is Peniston, and then he'd likely be a favorite against Tsitsipas in the second round, I would think. And then he'd likely be a favorite against any of, Shelton, Cher, or Cressy, or Daniel in the third round. But then he's got, again, a tough matchup in Seb Korda or Cam Norrie. He's got to get through Daniil or any of that group of Fucsovic, Griekspoor, Cerundolo, etc. And then he's got to beat Carlos or Zverev. It's probably going to be a bit much for Andy. So at plus 550, I totally would have given him a good look at 10-1 or something like that. But at this number, and maybe I'm just undervaluing just how fresh and solid Andy's going to be on this surface, because he is truly a rare grass specialist at this point in tennis, and that's something to be accounted for. But I think maybe you're better off looking at Andy on a match by match basis, especially if he's anything close to a pick him against Tsitsipas.
Yeah, I agree. 550 to me, incredibly overvalued, especially just because I get that it's Andy Murray and he's different, but you win the Surbiton Challenger, you win the Nottingham Challenger. It does not mean you're a contender to win Wimbledon. And I just feel like that leap, it's easy to make that leap and make a mistake with that. The angle that I've had on Murray for a while now, and I do think that it's a little bit less relevant in 2023, but you don't want to play him in the first 3 rounds. He's really good in particularly the first 2 rounds. And then he fades. So, it's bad news for Peniston. It's bad news for Tsitsipas. I'd say it's bad news for a Cressy or a Shelton. But after that, he really hasn't at any point since the hip surgery shown that he's going to beat a top 15 level player, let's say, after the 3rd round. There's been no evidence that that's in the cards, and I don't see it changing.
Yeah, I agree there. Murray at a dog price, please. Let's get that. If we get that in round 2 against Tsitsipas, I will laugh all the way to my phone before I place the wager. Anyway, we've talked about quarter 2 for a while. Just to recap, Gill, you're on Korda to win the quarter. Korda to win the quarter. Avery, you like Martin Fucsovics, our Hungarian friend. He is what, 40-1, you said?
Correct.
And Gill, you also mentioned you like Greek Spore. I've kind of consumed all the information on who I'm going to be riding with at this juncture, and I have decided on Tommy Paul as my official pick at 20-1. I just like this draw too much. I think there's no way he doesn't get to the 3rd or 4th round here, and then potentially get a pretty friendly draw depending on what's left of that section. If he's able to get out, whether it's Nori, Shelton, Korda, all guys that have question marks coming in. So I'm going to go with Tommy Paul as my official pick, 20-1 in this quarter to win it and get to the semis, which would be quite a feat for Tommy. Like you said, given the lack of success he's had recently. Let's go to quarter 3. We talked Robbie Batts, so we're going to briefly touch on this. Gill, we'll just go to you because Avery and I have kind of already gone in depth on this. You talked about Bautista Agut as well. You kind of said you have him in the quarterfinals. You have any other names or bets you have in this quarter to kind of go against our consensus Robbie Batts play?
Not really. I find Sinner and Fritz, first of all, to be somewhat of a toss-up in their own right. Not to mention, I didn't really plan on getting behind either of them coming into the tournament. Just so happens that I find this quarter to be relatively weak, and therefore I do think that they'll meet each other. And then, I mean, I just don't think the price is there on Jannik Sinner. So I looked at the bottom 8th of this quarter. I also like Bautista Agut in that area. And that was also my play here, even though I think that it might be hedge time come the quarterfinals.
Yeah, Sinner
I
and
would
Fritz
advocate
kind of ending up on the same half here, same little section, kind of makes it a little interesting.
I would advocate just a little bit for Fritz at 5-1. I think he's far better at 5-1 than Jannik Sinner at 2-1. Because, like Gill noted, that match is a complete toss-up. And Fritz really struggled mentally last year against an injured Nadal. And if it wasn't for that, and he got through Rafa, he's in the semis and he has his quarter. So he's super capable on grass. I know he looked really poor against Mackey in Eastbourne. But at the end of the day, that's just a warm-up tournament, and it's not the biggest deal in the world, and he's really capable of playing on grass. So maybe a little bit of T. Fritz, who I'm not the biggest fan of, to be honest, because of his mental struggles and slams, but much better than Sinner at 2-1.
I think Casper Ruud is also fascinating. Talk about a guy who coming into the tournament, you just think, okay, the guy's 3-5 in his career on grass, and he doesn't seem interested in getting any better. So why the heck should we get behind him? And then the draw is just an absolute silver platter. And what has he done in his career? He's turned these opportunities at majors into runs. So I don't know if I have the guts to do it, but he's 8-1, having made 3 major finals in his career. And, we're looking at a huge opportunity when it comes to the draw itself.
I could be convinced to take Brody or Lestienne against Casper Ruud in the second round.
I just
Lauren Lecoli once had a dance off with Gael Monfils. He could maybe give Ruud a problem in the first round.
He's playing through the spirit of Monfils just for you, Anthony.
Exactly. By the way, still mad that I didn't mention Monfils on the last pod when he won outright in the first round in one of the greatest matches of all time. And I'm still mad because I put a note in our doc to mention Monfils and how he was going to win, and then I didn't, and that was on me. Anyway,
Sure,
won't happen again. He's not in the field here. But Laurent will be channeling his spirit. No, do not bet Laurent Lecoli against Ruud. Maybe first set. Ruud hasn't played tennis. He's been partying in Spain, kind of hitting the raves. Not quite focused and dialed in here, maybe. But no, I'm not interested in him. Anyway, not a ton in general in this quarter. I think it's kind of interesting to see what Fritz looks like. We'll get to upset picks. We're going to each give our favorite first round upset in a minute. And once we talk about the fourth quarter, where there's this guy from Serbia, and he's the 2 seed, and he's minus 450 to win the quarter, minus 350 to make the final. And the draw, we've already discussed Djokovic's draw. I mean, it doesn't get much easier than getting put in a quarter with Avery and Kashin and some clay court specialists, Hurkacz and Musetti, and Hubie can be fun, but the form hasn't been great with him. And Felix, we all want to get behind Felix, but he hasn't been very good lately either. Bublik is going to be the hot name, right? But how is there any value in going against Novak in a quarter?
I mean, it's also just the fact that we have a large sample size of Alexander Bublik. Like, he's played well over 15 majors in his career, and he hasn't passed the third round. And I loved his hollow run. He played awesome. Nobody could return his serve. His ace rates were through the roof. His focus was great. But is he going to continue to serve that well? And is he going to continue to focus that well? And I think those are huge question marks, and I got to see it for more than 1 week. So I think it's a good idea to try to get on the other side of Bublik.
Yeah, I think
it's a
that's
good
an
point.
astute. Yeah, I think that's actually a good sell high position on Bublik. And Bublik against Djokovic, to be honest, maybe Bublik would be trendy on some levels in that match. I think Novak would absolutely destroy Bublik because he's going to get on that serve so well. And in baseline rallies, it's a joke between those two. So I would stay away from it, and I would completely stay away from this quarter in general. Felix, if he wasn't still holding some injuries and really struggling, maybe that would be just a tiny bit of a look, considering he took Rafa to 5 at Roland Garros, so maybe he can take some players in their home courts, or their best courts, I should say. The other one is Nick, who's could be a decent price at 14-1 if he wasn't also dealing with some serious injury concerns, and it's hard to see him playing 3 out of 5 matches consistently, so I would stay away from this quarter. The humble underdog from Serbia will take it and challenge the 1 seed, number 1 in the world, Carlos Alcaraz, in the final.
The thing that Kyrgios is 12-1 when he lost to Yibing Wu and was apologizing to his fans for not being at the level he needs to be. I mean, if you're betting if you want to bet Nick Kyrgios to win this quarter at 12-1, shoot me a DM. I'll book it, and we'll do that, because save your money, please. Same with Berrettini. I love Nick Kyrgios. Maybe I have some questions, marks about his character at times, and he's not always not always professional at times, for sure, and he wears his emotions on his sleeve for better or worse. And I love watching him play, but this Nick is not the Nick of last year. This is not a Nick of anywhere, shape, or form to be, consistently beating these top guys that he would need to do to get to this Met point. And same with Berrettini. I mean, just because they played in the Wimbledon final the last 2 years doesn't make them all of a sudden dark horses. I mean, everybody can look at the draw and know, oh, look, Kyrgios was in the final last year, 12-1 to win the quarter. He also, hasn't had any success, and I think he reveres Novak to the point where he would not mail it in, but know that he's pretty up against it. If he even got that far, where he gets Goffin in round one, I think he may well lose. So I have no interest in Nick Kyrgios, and no interest in Berrettini either. I wish they were in better form. It'd make for a better tournament, but they're not.
That's one of the aspects of this, Novak thing where we're kind of shrugging our shoulders, because these are legitimately FAA, Berrettini, Kyrgios. These are the three guys who are actually elevated by grass, where we talk about so many guys who are made worse by being having this grass under their feet. Your Tsitsipas, your Medvedev, your Ruud, your Zverev even. It's so many of them. And then the guys who that's not the case with, they have health question marks. And I completely agree with everything you said about Nick. There's a notion that he doesn't need to work hard and he doesn't need to train, and it's total BS. It's not true.
Yeah, I mean, Nick was dedicated last year and he put amazing results in, and I wish he did that more. Anyway, let's get to upsets. First round, we've talked through all the quarters. None of us have any bets, I guess, for the fourth quarter, because there's just no point in going against Djokovic. You're drawing dead. I mean, I was pretty proud of my Karen Khachanov ticket last tournament at Roland Garros. I was like 12-1. Karen, Djokovic, maybe he loses early. And then I'm like, oh, great. I got Khachanov to the quarterfinal. He's 8-1 against Novak. What a great job. What a great ticket. And it was dead. I mean, he won a set, but it wasn't competitive. And so, if Novak goes out for some unknown reason, congratulations. You now have incredible value on your quarters tickets, but I'm not betting this quarter personally. And we can move on to upset alert. Avery, you jumped at the bit when I mentioned this in our pre-show text. You have an upset you like in round one. Odds are up for round one matches at FanDuel. What is your favorite upset match? And you could also make it a popcorn match to steal it from Gill if you want to throw that in there.
Yeah, not popcorn matches, but I actually have two that I really like. And the first is Nuno Borges against Francisco Cerundolo. A Cerundolo who will likely have played two matches on Saturday, I believe. Is that correct, Gill? This is a Saturday final. Yeah, so this will all be on Saturday, as long as he converts from 5-2 against Mackie McDonald in the morning. Then he'll have a second match in the final in Eastbourne. It's fortunate for him that he's playing on Tuesday. This isn't a Monday match against Borges, but Borges is a guy who is very capable on the big stage. He beat Ben Shelton at the US Open. He snagged a win, I believe, in two of his last three Slam main draws. So I'm not concerned about the mentality necessarily. And I'm also not concerned about his game. He reached a semifinal on grass in a challenger, losing to Andy Murray, who's just a level above him on the surface. And he also has flat strokes. So his game suits really well. He's pretty flat forehand and even flatter backhand. Can have a big serve a lot of the time. It was Isner that he beat actually at Roland Garros, now that I think about it, in 5 sets. So he came through some really tough matches against Shelton and Isner, and almost beat Wu, who is in great form at the US Open as well. This guy's a gamer. His play really suits the surface, and he could be coming into a Cerundolo who, when not serving well on grass, can be really gettable. The second is Jan Choinski against Dusan Lajovic. Choinski is a guy that not many people are going to know. And I haven't seen many of his matches, admittedly, since my consumption of the Challenger Tour has far decreased in the last year or 2 years. But he's a guy that likes clay a little bit more than grass, even though he's British. But nonetheless, he's a big guy with a big serve. And he's been playing on grass, whereas Dusan Lajovic has not been playing since the French Open after withdrawing against Zhizhen Zhang, where he was hurt. Is a guy that does not like playing on the grass. I believe he's 6-23 on grass in his career, and Choinski is 2-11. But nonetheless, it's a spot that I really like Choinski, especially at a plus 180 price. So Nuno Borges plus 280, Jan Choinski plus 180.
All right, Gill.
So I'm going to go first with a Roland Garros rematch. Arthur Fils is plus 122 against Alejandro Davidovich Fokina. And ADF won in Paris in 4 sets. The big difference here is the serve. Fils has a way bigger serve than Fokina, and especially on the first day at Wimbledon, when the second day when the grass is slick, it's playing quicker, and you can get a lot of cheap points and get a lot of free points. And ultimately Fils has this extremely aggressive personality on the court. He's going after his shots. And I think Davidovic-Fokina on the red clay, flying around and scrambling and defending is a problem for Fils. And on grass, it's just not going to be that same issue. So if they're going to get into a war of shot making and finishing capabilities, I think Fils is right there and some. So Davidovic-Fokina, also someone with some issues with consistency. And I think the arrhythmic kind of best of 5 match against very, I guess, fiery opponent can also play into Fis's advantage.
I didn't think Gill was going to mention that because I gave him out at 4-1 on the French Open pod, and he got absolutely waxed. And I thought we'd get a little bit of a better number here, but I'm still going to be riding with Fils as well. I think the surface is, that much of a difference. I agree with that. I'm also going against Taylor Fritz in the first round. I've been really impressed with Hanfman taking kind of a step forward and really being impressive. I got to give a shout out to my pal, Matt Liberman, who, I talk tennis with on a regular basis, and he kind of had this one circled as well. So I'm going to go with Hanfman to pull off an upset against Fritz. You talked about it, Avery, with Fritz. Like, I go back and forth on my opinions of Taylor and kind of how he manages his mental and how he, progresses as a player. But I think Hanfman has the kind of game that can give him problems. They've played this season. So, I'm going to go with him as my underdog in round 1 as well. I will be betting Peniston to win a set. May even sprinkle some money line too against Andy. Just think that his game on the grass is really interesting. And any interest, I know you talked about how you're kind of long Tiafoe here. Yibing Wu in the first round. Thoughts on that matchup? Are we still going to just see a lot of tie breaks? If so, I think it, almost 4-1, Yibing Wu is kind of intriguing.
Playable number for sure. He's been really liking the grass in his first grass court season. At this number, yeah, you could sprinkle it for sure, and I'd say it's a pretty solid bet.
Yeah, I can't disagree. Even as someone who likes Tiafoe, Wu, they actually have similar qualities on the return. They take it really early, and they have fast enough hands to hit the return pretty fast, even though they are taking it early. And that's nasty on grass. It's important on grass, and so that's good. And then I guess I'll also add Mackie McDonald plus 180. Alexander Bublik kind of mentioned wanting to fade Bublik. Yeah, Mackie is going to need to play on Saturday, lose in Eastbourne likely. He's way down in that match currently. But it is grass. That's the only counter to the I don't think it's ideal to play 2 matches on Saturday before Wimbledon, don't get me wrong, but it's not as physical. And therefore I don't think it's as consequential as certainly playing before the US Open and definitely playing before Roland Garros.
All right. Well, that will do it for the men's singles preview of the Championships Wimbledon. I only call it that. It's the Championships Wimbledon. It's a kind of a thing of mine. But thank you to Avery and Gill. We are big fans now. So Robbie, Roberto Bautista Agut, 14-1 to win his quarter. Gill's on some Sebi Korda. We threw a ton of first round upsets. I'm not going to recap all of them, but we also threw some shots on some longer guys in what is a very open field outside of the top. I am personally not invested in Djokovic at minus 175, but may end up doing it anyway because I just, for a guy who's this much better than the field, I don't know how you beat him in a 3 of 5 here unless Alcaraz finds a level and can manage his nerves. So that will do it for this episode. We will be back ahead of the US Open to do the 4th and final major of the season. Might have a little bit of a different crew, but nevertheless, hoping to make this and continue what has been a successful podcast thus far. And thank you all for listening.